Hello, everyone. This is Jose Palomino with another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And today's guest is Alex Goldfayn. And Alex is an expert at helping B2B organizations get their salespeople additional leads, additional bandwidth, additional opportunities with one simple core technique. It's a technique every one of us can employ. And there's a lot of depth to Alex, a lot of depth to what he does. And he has a new book coming out, which we're going to talk about as well, to help you do exactly this around this key principle. So listen in, because this can actually be a game changer. If you've ever wondered, where am I going to get 20, 30% growth from? Well, let's listen to Alex as he shares his key strategy for doing this. Well, welcome, Alex, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thank you, Jose, for having me. I sure appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. Alex, in getting ready for this interview, one of the things that really I took note of is how much work you do in the area of selling mindsets, like getting into the inner game of how people approach sales and revenue generation. So that's one of my favorite topics. So I definitely want to dig into that here. Who do you primarily work with? Maybe just a little, and what are some of the things you do for those people?
Yeah, so my clients are companies that manufacture things and distribute things predominantly, also B2B service companies.
Mm-hmm.
They are 10 million to $1 billion. I know it's a really big range. The median business is 50 million, 100 million, 250 million, like that.
Okay.
Usually multi-generational. And we grow sales. And by the way, the we is the me. And so when I say we, it's me and my client, the owner,
Right. Sure.
And his or her team. And my typical client adds 20 to 30% new sales annually.
Okay. Well, first of all, those are substantial numbers. But what I love about the way you frame that, Alex, is so many people out there, try to talk about, 100% growth, 200% growth, things that, I mean, short of like somebody invented some like a vaccine or something that no one else had, is really hard to do, especially with a more mature company. So you're aiming for really what are really ambitious targets, but in the realm of like the real world. I mean, it can be done. And obviously you have experience doing that. When you talk to an owner or leadership team, and let's say $100 million manufacturing company, an OEM or something like that, what are some of the things that you look for to tell you whether or not the opportunities for growth are in the areas that you focus on?
So the areas I focus on, if you boil it all the way, is proactive communication with customers and prospects.
Okay.
And so what I look for is the sales organization reaching out to customers and prospects when nothing is wrong, which is the definition of proactive, right?
Okay.
95% of salespeople and sales organizations, sales groups, sales teams, they sell reactively, which means the phone rings, we pick it up, we take the order. We're really good at that. When customers call, it's rarely to say, hey, Jose, great job, man. That was awesome. Can I pay you more? Right? We rarely get good news on the phone. When customers are calling us, there's usually a problem where they need something. It's urgent. And we become a reactive company, a reactive organization. And so what I look for is how often are salespeople calling customers and prospects to say, Jose, it's Alex. How you doing, man? I was thinking about you. How's your family? How are the kids? How's summer winding down? It's great to talk to you. Listen, I was wondering, what are you working on these days that I can help you with? That's what I'm wondering. That's what I'm asking about. And I'll tell you, almost always the answer is we're not doing that, because it's all we can do to keep our head above water and not drown from all the problems and inquiries that are incoming.
Wow. So, all right. So let's say you ask that question and they tell you, listen, we really can't get to it because, as you described, we have all these other, fire drills that we have to go through to just stay alive, right? So what are some steps that owner can take to say, okay, but I like what you're saying, Alex. I'm believing. I think that's a good idea. I would like to inculcate that somewhat in my team. I would like to see that behavior, but how do I balance the urgencies of the now with doing something that may be, a long-term investment in how I manage my
Yeah.
accounts? How do I transition
Yeah.
that? Do I just need
Well,
to add double my head count?
no. The beauty is, it's a great question, Jose. The beauty is that it only takes a few minutes of proactivity a day uh, by the whole group to really make a huge difference. Do you know how many calls, 3 calls a day is? If I make 3 proactive calls a day with the kind of language that we just, talked about, 3 calls a day is almost 800 calls a year. Now, if you've got a group of 10 salespeople, that's 8,000 phone calls a year. If you got a group of 100 salespeople, you're at 80,000 phone calls a year. Now, if you do those calls, most of the time you're going to leave a voicemail, right? Because you're calling proactively and they're not expecting it. And so to make 3 phone calls and leave 3 messages in the scripting that I teach, as well as in my new book, which we'll get to, actually launching this week, 2/3 of those outbound proactive calls will communicate back to you. 2/3. So let's go with the sales team of 10, 8,000 calls a year
8,000 calls.
at 3 calls a day, which,
Right.
by the way, 3 calls a day is 3 to 5 minutes a day, right? Because you're leaving voicemails.
Sure.
3 to 5 minutes a day. So you can still be really, really busy and give me 3 phone calls a day to feed the machine, to feed the business. 2/3 will call you back. 2/3 of 8,000 is something like 5,500. That's 5,500 communications with customers and prospects to opportunities, to help them more, to tell them what else you can do for them, to offer them additional products and services, to ask them what they need. And how could business possibly not grow if your whole sales team makes 3 phone calls a day?
Wow, when you put it like that, Alex, it looks simple, but yet somebody reading that and said, "Well, yeah, I believe, right? I accept the premise. It sounds like the math works out, and so on." Yet I'm sure you've encountered organizations that even hearing that compelling math somehow still can't get to it. So there must be some other obstacle, whether psychological, physical, process wise, because otherwise everybody would be doing this.
You're asking really smart questions. The biggest obstacle to doing this is fear. Not so much for the owner, but for each individual that has to pick up the phone, right? So fear. So look, everybody knows, Jose, that the phone is a more effective selling tool than email. Everybody knows. Every salesperson in their right mind knows that the phone is more effective than email. And yet we email a lot more than we call. So the reason we do that, because you started with mindset in our conversation, the reason we go away from the phone, the single most effective selling tool, which is also the single most avoided selling tool, is fear. And the thing that we are afraid of is the thing that happens to us all day long, which is rejection. We are in the rejection business. If you're selling, you're getting rejected all day. The problem is most salespeople are trying to avoid rejection with everything they have, which is why we avoid the phone, because the rejection is intimate into our ear holes, right? Literally, they're rejecting us into our head. And if I send an email, I'm not getting rejected into my head. I'm just getting silence. It's not an intimate, personal rejection.
Sure. I don't feel it viscerally. I don't feel it emotionally.
And so organizations don't do this, coming back to your question, because individual salespeople resist it. Not everybody, but many. They resist it because they are afraid of making the call. Because as we said earlier, they're getting yelled at all day. All day long, problems and urgencies come in on the phone, right? That's the only time people call. And when we say to them, let's call 3 a day, they're like, no, man, I'm good. I'm getting yelled at all day long. I'm not really interested in going to more of that. And that's why it doesn't happen more, even though everybody knows it would be good for business if it happened.
Right, because the way you explained it, Alex, I mean, only somebody who really doesn't have a grip on reality would argue and say, well, yeah, those numbers make a whole lot of sense. And in fact, they're very exciting numbers when you think about the leverage. And it just goes to, the law of small numbers. In other words, a little bit done. When you look at any process, if you improve like a quality process, 5% here, 2% here, it multiplies, and all of a sudden you have a greater level of success. But I'm looking at that owner leader, that small sales team. They're saying, okay, great. We need to get there. We need to figure out a way to encourage people to deal with rejection. So, what are some things when you talk to sales teams, and you probably call out the elephant in the room? You probably hate rejection. You don't like it, exactly as you described. What are some mental like exercises or handles so that I can actually strap on and make those 3 calls a day and feel good about doing so?
Yeah. Well, there's a few. One is uh, the very first phone call will often be the answer to getting you to the second and third phone call, because you're gonna have a good conversation with somebody. You're gonna connect. Um, now especially, people are still wanting to connect very much. Because a lot of us aren't together in an office, and so
Mm-hmm.
people miss people. Um, and you'll build a relationship with the person you called. They'll appreciate that you called. They'll probably tell you how nice it is that you called, because nobody's calling. And then that'll give you energy, positivity, confidence, optimism, motivation, even some boldness. And when you put down that call, you're going to have enough to pick up the next call, to pick up the next phone, and make it. Pick up the phone and make the next call. There it
Make
is.
the next call.
Uh,
Got it.
and and so that first call is often the answer to the process. And I say, make your calls. There's a chapter in the book. When should you call? And the answer is first thing in the morning. You should call immediately when you sit down at your desk. Mark Twain said that if you're going to eat a frog, you might as well eat it first thing in the morning, because it's not going to taste any better later in the day. And if you have to eat 2 frogs, eat the
Right.
biggest one first, right? Make the worst, hardest action the first action.
Right.
Because when you come in, that's when we have the most energy. That's when we have the most reserve built up. And it's
Sure.
uncomfortable work, right? It's not work that everybody's running towards. That's why it's avoided.
Right.
So do it first, and then you'll get the energy. Now, there's other ways, but that's sort of the quickest, most practical, actionable step that I can share.
Well, Alex, I hear you, but I like to send some valuable content in advance. I like to let people know that I have something that they can read. There's a great blog post or a great video my company's created. And you know what? I'd rather create interest, and then that way, when they reach out to me, they actually want to talk to me. Doesn't that seem like a more efficient use of time?
Well, you can absolutely send whatever you want, as long as before or after that you're also picking up the phone and connecting with somebody like a human being. Send whatever you want. Just don't only send and stop, because that makes you totally forgettable. Everybody's only sending and not calling. That's the thing, Jose. When we pick up the phone and call people, we think their phones are ringing off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. Actually, nobody's calling. Look, we're all sitting by our phones, right? Are you by your phone? Can you hold it up to the camera right
Yeah,
now?
right
There
here.
it is. If you could ask, I'm on webinars, right, every day, and I'll say to people, if you can reach your phone right now, and I see all their squares,
Right.
on my Zoom, hold your phone up to the screen. 100 people do this, what you just did, and everybody's sitting by the phone. And then I say to them, okay, you guys are owners. When's the last time your phone rang? Somebody called you, a business contact, a relationship, who you know. And I'm actually asking you this, Jose. When's the last time? You're the owner of the business, right? Of your company.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So if somebody wants to sell something to you, you're the buyer. You're the one who's going to sign the check. When's the last time a supplier called who you knew, not a cold call, a business supplier who could help you, and said to you the kinds of things that, we ran through earlier? Jose, it's Alex. I was thinking about you. How's your family? How are the kids? What are you doing? And by the way, man, what are you working on that I could help with? I'd like to help. When's the last time you got a call like that? Can you remember?
I can't. I mean, you're really my mind is flying in a million directions as you talk about this. I'm trying to visualize when's the last time I've got that pitch call, or not even a pitch call, a
Not a pitch
connection
call,
call from a human
relationship
being who
call,
could help me,
a human call, not
a
a pitch
human
call.
call. Um, honestly, Alex, I really can't even bring one to memory.
I got one, and most people say what you say because it's so rare. I got one a year ago. The
Okay.
last one, a year ago. Jose, I remember exactly who called. I remember what time of day it was. I remember what his voice sounded like. I remember how long the call lasted, and I remember what we talked about, and I even remember what I was doing, where I was. I was I was in my office here, walking around because I was so excited that the phone rang and somebody called me, and I went and got my earbuds and I put them in, and I walked up and down my office. I paced here, and it was a year ago. And the reason I remember all of that is it's freaking singular. Nobody else has called me like that in the last year. Now you send your email
Right.
and you're with all the crap, you're with all the junk, and it makes you totally forgettable. But the phone call makes you utterly singular. You're going to be the only one. Your competition, for those of you listening and watching this right now, your competition is not calling on your customers and prospects. And so when you do it, you will be the only one.
So it's like like I could win the Olympics if I'm the only one running, and I would otherwise have no chance.
It's not. That's right. When you're calling people, that's really well said. It's not you against the other people that are calling.
Right.
The decision simply becomes you or not you, and that's a pretty good place to be.
That's
right.
Right.
It's not you against seven others. You're the only one on the track. All the other lanes are empty.
Wow. Well, Alex, so one thing that comes to mind is there's been a lot written of late, and around like the new protocols, the new the new etiquettes, right? Like scheduling a call, the fact that everybody's on Zoom now. You often hear people say, "Well, the reality is no one's calling because no one answers their phone if they don't recognize the number. Everything goes to voicemail and so on." So, what are some thoughts that you might have there for our listeners around, how true is that? Does that make it not obviously you still believe it's tenable, but how does it work in this new world that we're in post, well, not totally post COVID, but heading towards a post COVID world?
I think that all of that is to our advantage, those of us who use the phone. And I think you can schedule all you want. And I think that Zoom, by definition, cannot be proactive. You cannot proactively Zoom somebody because they have to be there. They have to show up at a certain day and time. Otherwise, you'll be talking to yourself. So Zoom is a meeting replacement. Replace your meetings with Zoom calls. Don't replace your phone calls with Zoom because it's two different things. You can think of meetings and Zoom as somewhat interchangeable. Of course, it's more effective to be in a room with somebody to the extent that that's possible. But don't think of Zoom as a replacement for phone calls. And as far as scheduling things, look, we want everybody scheduled to the gills. The interesting thing is to get a helpful outreach when you're not expecting it. Is to get somebody helpful, which is what you're doing here, to call you and say, "I'd like to help you." And when people hear that, they'll grab onto you and they'll never let go. And they'll never ever say to you, "No, I'd rather you not make my life easier today." You will never hear that. Everybody wants to be helped, and that's all we're doing.
Wow, that's powerful, and actually just a way to put Zoom in a proper context of what it really does and what it doesn't do. So it doesn't take the place of the phone. And you alluded to before around voicemails, and I have a particular belief about voicemails that in many ways it's like you get a free 30-second commercial into somebody's private, listening space. You'd pay a ton of money to do that on the radio, because you'd have to do it at scale, and a lot of people would listen that don't have anything to do with your message. But what would make a good voicemail that I would leave? Because just the way people are and how quickly people delete things and so on.
Yeah.
What's your advice there?
Yeah. Now this is in the book that's out this week.
Okay. We're
Can
gonna
I
get
give
to
the
book
title?
first.
Can I give the title
Yeah,
of the
absolutely.
book?
We're waiting.
Thank
Yes.
you. The title of the book is Pick Up the Phone and Sell. And it comes out this week from Wiley. That's my publisher. My last two books were Wall Street Journal bestsellers. I think this one will be as well. And Pick Up the Phone and Sell has everything that we're talking about here today. And so the voicemail script I'm about to share with you is almost word for word from the book. It goes like this. Jose, it's Alex Goldfayn. I hope you're well. Listen, I was thinking about you because I have a client similar to you, and they're experiencing some fantastic growth, which is what I do in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you sell something else, you might say they're buying some interesting products from us that are working really well for them. And I think it would also work well for you. And I'd love to tell you about that. It made me think of you. Here's my number. Give me a ring back. Of course, I look forward to catching up. Then I hang up the phone. And then I send a text. As soon as I leave my voicemail, I'm texting. And I'll say, Jose, just left you a message. Would love to catch up. I've got something interesting to share. How's your Tuesday or Thursday look next week? That's my text. 2/3, 2 out of 3. So I make 3 calls a day. 2 of them, over thousands of calls, will communicate back to me. 2/3 of those will send me back a text.
Wow.
So now the decision is not, should I call Alex back or not? The decision is, should I call Alex back or should I text him back? Should I call or should I text? I've given them 2 options, not a yes-no option, but 2 options, both of which are helpful to me and them, because if they connect with me, it's helpful to them.
Sure.
Now, look, I run a solo consulting practice. It's a $3 million business. I do that by myself. I have an assistant who works with me half-time. I work solo. I run that business every year on 3 calls a day. 3. If I wanted to get bigger, I would go to 5 calls a day. Okay. That's what I would do. 3 calls a day, feed the machine here. If you've got a sales team, I will guarantee you, I will bet my children's college money, which is very important to me, on this, that if you get your sales team to make 3 proactive calls a day to customers and prospects following the scripting that we've sampled here today, your business will grow significantly because nobody else is calling on your customers and prospects.
Wow, Alex. Well, look, we're going to have to, just because of time, and you've been so gracious sharing such great insights for our audience. But if somebody listening says, hey, I want to learn more about this, where should they go to, connect with you, learn more about you, and then call out the book again?
Sure. So my website is my last name, goldfayn.com. Goldfayn, goldfayn.com. That's where you can go to find all my stuff. You can also go to Amazon and search for that same thing, or just search for Pick Up the Phone and Sell, and buy the new book that's out this week. And Jose, I'm grateful and I appreciate that you had me on and allowed me to share a few of these ideas.
No, this is fantastic stuff, Alex. And really, for our listeners, I'm sure it's very helpful, and probably got more than a few people thinking, boy, I got to talk to my VP of sales, or I got to talk to my salespeople about this. Are they doing this? And your research shows and your practical experience shows they're going to say not really. And can they do this? Yeah. Your book will give them the tools necessary to start doing this.
That's right.
And if they need more help than that, they should definitely reach out to you at goldfayn.com.
That's right.
Alex, thank you again so much for being on the Revenue Throughput podcast.
Thanks, Jose.